Today I'm visiting a place that I've thought about for years, a place connected to one of the most tragic and fascinating stories in Appalachian Trail history. In July 2013, Gerry Largay disappeared while hiking the Appalachian Trail in western Maine. Despite one of the largest search efforts in Maine history, she was never found. More than 2 years later, a survey crew discovered her campsite deep in the woods. For years, I've read articles about her disappearance. Recently, I finished reading the book, When You Find My Body. Like many people, I found myself asking the same questions. How did this happen? How could someone become lost so close to the Appalachian Trail? Today, I'm not here looking for answers. I'm here because I want to understand. As somebody who thru hiked the Appalachian Trail myself in 2007 and who spends tremendous amounts of time alone in remote places, Gerry's story has always felt personal. One thing that's important to understand is that Gerry wasn't an inexperienced hiker. She was hiking the Appalachian Trail as a flip flopper, starting in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, and working her way north to Maine, before eventually planning to complete the southern portion of the trail. By the time she reached western Maine, she had already spent months living outdoors and hiking hundreds of miles. She wasn't new to the trail. She wasn't reckless. She was pursuing a dream. In fact, Gerry owned a spot satellite device and a Sawyer water filter, two pieces of gear that could have been invaluable in an emergency. But neither was with her on this section of the trail. I don't mention that to criticize her. I mention it because it reminds us that most of us make decisions based on what we expect to happen, not what we never imagine happening. When you're following a well marked trail and everything is going according to plan, it's easy to leave certain gear behind. Unfortunately, emergencies rarely happen when we're expecting them. As I thought about Gerry's story, I found myself reflecting on my own Appalachian Trail experience. I thru hiked the AT in 2007. Like many thru hikers, I wasn't carrying detailed maps and constantly taking bearings with a compass. For the most part, I followed the white blazes. The Appalachian Trail is designed to be followed, and that's what most hikers do. The challenge isn't usually navigation. The challenge is putting one foot in front of the other day after day for months at a time. What many people misunderstand about Gerry's story is that hiking the Appalachian Trail and navigating through trackless forest are two completely different skills. A person can successfully hike hundreds of miles on the Appalachian Trail and still struggle if they suddenly need to navigate off trail without a clear reference point. That doesn't make them inexperienced, it doesn't make them careless, simply means they're being asked to solve a different problem than the one they've been solving every day on the trail.
Okay, so I'm in about the area that Gerry might have wandered off of the trail. This is the direction that she would have wandered, and you can see very quickly once you get off the trail, it's so easy to get disoriented. So, I mean, here I am, and what happens when we take a few steps in here, you know? I mean, you're supposed to go about 200 feet off of the trail if you're going to the bathroom. A lot of people don't, but that's what you're supposed to do. And, you know, here I'm not paying attention. I'm just walking into the woods right here. And, you know, all of a sudden, everything looks the same. If I wasn't paying attention, I could get disoriented very quickly. And that stream over there, I can barely even hear that anymore. And I'm probably about 50 feet maximum off of the trail right now.
One of the most important details in Gerry's story is that we actually know why she left the Appalachian Trail that day. After realizing she was lost, Gerry composed a text message to George. The message never went through, but it was later recovered from her phone. In that message, she explained that she had stepped off the trail to use the bathroom and could not find her way back. Think about that for a moment. That wasn't a major navigation mistake. She wasn't attempting a shortcut. She wasn't exploring far off trail. She simply stepped into the woods for a routine and completely ordinary reason. As I walked through this area today, I found myself thinking about that moment. The forest where I approached from consisted largely of mature hardwoods. The walking was relatively easy. Visibility was good. At first glance, it doesn't seem like the kind of place where someone could become hopelessly lost. But after spending time here, I began to understand how it could happen. In a mature hardwood forest, everything can look remarkably similar. There are no white blazes, no trail signs, no obvious landmarks, no indication where you entered the woods, just trees stretching in every direction. As someone who thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2007, I can tell you that many hikers aren't constantly navigating with maps and bearings. They're following a well-marked footpath, and that's an important distinction. Following a trail is one skill, finding a trail after you've lost it is another. Looking back with the benefit of hindsight, it's easy to ask how someone could lose a trail that was likely very close by. Standing in the woods today, I found myself asking a different question. How easy would it be to become turned around before you even realized there was a problem? Because once uncertainty creeps in, every direction begins to look the same. And that's where a simple bathroom break can turn into something far more serious. To reach the location where Jerry's tent was eventually found, I approached from below. I followed a brook uphill toward the site. Using the brook as a handrail made navigation simple, but my experience and Jerry's experience were fundamentally different. I had a map and compass. I had OnX. I had Garmin Explorer. I knew exactly where I was every second of the hike. I knew where the Appalachian Trail was. I knew where the campsite was. I knew where my vehicle was. At no point did I question my location. Jerry didn't have those advantages. She had a compass, but a compass only tells you direction. It doesn't tell you where you are. Once you become disoriented, knowing north doesn't necessarily solve the problem, and that's something that's easy to forget when we're looking back on the situation with the benefit of hindsight. Before making this hike, I had spent a lot of time reading about Jerry's story. I had read articles, I had read the book When You Find My Body, and because of that, I already had a pretty good idea of what I expected to find. The site itself was largely what I imagined it would be. There aren't many obvious signs that something significant happened there. Other than the memorial crosses that have been placed in Jerry's honor, it blends into the surrounding forest. What surprised me wasn't the site, it was the terrain. Before coming here, I had often wondered how someone could become lost so close to the Appalachian Trail. After walking through the woods myself, I found that question becoming less difficult to answer. The lower elevations where I approached from were largely mature hardwood forest. Travel was relatively easy, visibility was fairly good, but as I moved through the landscape, I began to appreciate how quickly someone could become disoriented. The forest isn't necessarily thick enough to stop you from moving. In many places, it's easy to keep walking. The problem is that every direction can begin to look the same. Without a trail, without a map, without a known point of reference, it's easy to understand how uncertainty could slowly build. The other thing I noticed was how dramatically the forest changes over a relatively short distance. As I gained elevation on my return toward the Appalachian Trail, the hardwoods gradually gave way to thicker spruce and fir. Visibility became more restricted. Travel became slower. The woods felt different. And that contrast helped me better understand the complexity of the terrain Jerry was dealing with. I didn't leave here feeling like I had solved a mystery, but I did leave with a better appreciation for how a seemingly small mistake could become a very serious problem.
All right, well, it's been a good visit here. I'm really glad I got to visit this spot and see where Gerry spent her final days. It helps me connect more with the story, and I really feel for her, and um, just wanted to kind of come out here to, in her honor, you know. But anyways, the mosquitoes are swarming. Ugh. And it's time for me to head out because it's about 4 o'clock and I gotta get out of here. So out we go.
What struck me most when I was reading about Gerry was how hard she fought after she got lost. She repeatedly attempted to contact her husband. She tried to signal aircraft using her red jacket. She managed to build fires. She journaled. She prayed. She read. She held on to hope. By the 6th day, she had exhausted her food supply. Yet she survived for weeks afterward. Think about that. This wasn't a brief emergency. This was an extended struggle for survival. And throughout much of that time, she appears to have believed she would eventually be found. Honestly, most of us probably would have believed the same thing. One of the most remarkable facts about this story is that Gerry believed she was 3 or 4 miles from the Appalachian Trail. In reality, she was only between 2,500 to 3,000 feet away. When people hear that number, they often wonder how that's possible. After today's hike, I think I understand a little better. Challenge wasn't necessarily the distance. Challenge was uncertainty. I knew exactly where I was. I knew exactly where I was going. Gerry didn't. Once you've lost confidence in your location, every direction becomes a guess. Every decision becomes harder, and suddenly, a short distance on a map can feel impossibly far away. On my way back to the AT, I chose a different route. Rather than following the brook back down and going the way that I had came, I contoured directly back toward the trail. The elevation I had gained showed a big change in the forest. The open hardwoods had given way to thicker spruce and fir. Visibility decreased. Small undergrowth became more common. Travel became slower. The woods felt more enclosed. That contrast was one of the biggest takeaways from my visit. Terrain here isn't one thing, it changes quickly, and those changes can dramatically affect how a person experiences the landscape. Standing there, I found myself thinking less about how Gerry became lost and more about how difficult it would have been to regain confidence once she realized she was.
Yeah, the way I'm going out is a lot more difficult. There's a lot more spruce and fir trees up in this elevation. I entered from below her site in that nice open hardwood area, but up here, just up the hill a little ways, there's a lot more softwood, spruce and fir trees mixed in. Here we go. The AT corridor.
When I started this hike, I thought I was coming here to better understand what happened, but that's not really what I left with. I left with a better understanding of Gerry. I didn't come away thinking she was careless. I didn't come away thinking I had solved a mystery. Instead, I came away with empathy. As outdoors people, it's easy to look at a story like this and convince ourselves that we would have done something differently. Maybe we would have. Maybe we wouldn't have. The truth is that we're looking backward with information Gerry never had. Standing in these woods today reminded me that Gerry wasn't a mystery. She wasn't a headline. She wasn't a case file. She was a person, pursuing a dream, someone who loved being outdoors, someone who expected to finish her journey. I didn't make this hike to visit a death site. I made it because I wanted to better understand a fellow hiker. After spending time in these woods, I didn't leave with answers. I left with humility. because the wilderness doesn't care how experienced we think we are. It only asks that we respect it. And Gerry's story remains one of the most powerful reminders of that lesson that I've ever encountered.
Found what appears to be a flagging trail, so this likely was marked for going into the site. Okay. Back on the Appalachian Trail. Alright, went past the point that I originally came up, and I'm gonna try to go down a different logging road. Thinking that it might be a little bit more worn, and it connects to where the one that I took up branches off. So just gonna try this out and see if it's any better on the way down. All right, so here we are. This is the logging road I'm gonna go down, except I'm going this way. Already looks a lot nicer than the way I came up. Well, much easier walking overall, but this section is particularly wet. All right, all done, heading home. Got to make dinner tonight. And that was quite a trip. I'm really happy I did that. And it's just about 7.3 miles round trip. And took me 4 hours, just under 4 hours. And now the journey getting out of here, which is a journey itself, no doubt.